Hello everyone, my name is Kumar and welcome back to our channel KUMAR Programming. This is the 14th part of this series where we are building a complete e-commerce project as online shoe store in Next.js 15 and React 19. In our previous session, we have created our auth models which are user, account and session and verification token. These four models were required for our authentication. So we have created all these four models, and after that we migrated all those models to our database, and eventually we have seeded our user table with the user data. You can see here our user table is seeded with one admin user and one user role, right? So we have this admin role and here we have user role. Even though if you see we have the password 123456 for both of the users, but we have the different password over here, right? Because we are using salt and salt is being generated differently for both of the users, right? Now essentially we are going to set up next auth for our authentication, right? So now let's proceed. All right, guys. So now we are going to set up our NextAuth.js, which is a authentication solution for Next.js. And as I earlier mentioned that this next auth is being supported to the multiple providers. So let me quickly show you that what all the providers it support. So this is the sample application is being deployed on Vercel. And if you see here we have sign in option. And once we will click on sign in, here we can see the list of all the providers which is being supported by Next.js, right? So if you see this is being supported by most of the OAuth provider which we have as of now. And mainly if you see here we have Google and here we have Facebook, here we have Azure AD B2C and here we have Apple. So most of all the OAuth providers is being supported over here. So now we are going to implement it and they have provided the code for the reference here inside our source on GitHub. So we can have the reference of it. Now let's move and configure this. So click on get started. And here if you see inside our configuration, so first of all, we have to configure some of the environment variable like NextAuth URL, NextAuth secret, and NextAuth URL internal, right? These three environment variable that we have to configure initially. And after that, we have to configure this provider secret, right? So, and we have to configure session, we have to configure JWT and pages callback, right? So we are going to do all this configuration in this our session. Also, as far as the version goes for Next.js, as of now, if you see here, the current version, we have version 4, which is stable, but I would like to have this with version 5. Since this version 5 is in beta, see here, this version 5 is in beta, but I would like to make this tutorial relevant for a while, right? And might be once you are watching this tutorial, we would be having this version 5 as a stable version, right? Since version 5 is not stable so far, we are going to use this beta as a version 5, and this version 5 is going to be stable very soon. So now let's do all these bunch of configuration and get it ready for authentication. Now let's flip to the Visual Studio and install our Next Auth. Here, let's open the terminal, Control J. I'm going to open another terminal over here and let's install it, right? npm install Next Auth beta, which is going to be version 5 very soon, right? Let's install. Now our Next Auth is getting installed. So now Next Auth is installed. You can verify here inside our package.json file. And here we would be seeing our next auth, right? See here we are having next auth, which is a version 5. As of now it's beta, right? And also we are required to install Prisma adapter. So we are going to install Prisma adapter, npm install @auth / Prisma adapter, right? Let's install it. So our Prisma adapter is installed. Prisma adapter is used to improve the performance of our Prisma ORM, which we can set up for the Prisma instance to ensure only one instance is created throughout the project, right? And we will import it from any file as needed. And this approach is going to avoid recreating instances of Prisma client every time it is used, right? Now, if you see your package.json file, here we would be having auth Prisma adapter as well as we have our next auth, right? Now further we are going to configure all the required environment variable. Here we are going to copy all these three environment variables inside our .env file. Now let's quickly set all these environment variables. So for this next auth URL, it will be our this localhost 3000 which is going to be our production URL in production. Now let's paste it here, and also our next auth URL internal, also it's going to be the same URL, but in production it's going to be changed, right? Now we need to update this next auth secret. Now here if you see this next auth secret, we are having a command line tool which is going to generate the secret. So our command line tool is this OpenSSL. Let's use this command and let's open a terminal. Here we are going to generate our random base 64 32 bytes value, right? So now let's generate it, and it's not going to generate it over here in the PowerShell, so we are going to use our git bash command. Now let's paste it and press enter. Now see, we are having our this 32 byte secret. We are going to use this secret now here inside our next auth secret parameter, right? Now the next thing, we are going to create our auth config file. So now at the root level, we are going to create a file as a auth.ts, right? And inside this auth.ts, so here we have to do a bunch of stuff. So we will go step by step. So first of all, we will import our next auth from next auth, right? Now we are going to create our config, export const config. As of now, we are having a blank. We are going to put a lot of stuff over here, and then we are going to pass this config in our next auth, right? And we are going to export from this next config const handlers and auth sign in and sign out, right? So here handlers is an object which contain the multiple routes which is being used by NextAuth, and we are going to use this handler to create our next auth API. And auth is a function which is going to check the session, and also it's going to check if user is authenticated or not. And sign in is very simple, which is providing sign in option with a provider. If there is no provider specified, then user will be redirected to the sign in page, right? And this is sign out, which is used to sign out to the user and remove the session from the database and make the cookie invalidated, right? Now we are going to update this config. So first of all, we are going to use here pages. So now we are going to use this sign in, and we will paste it over here. Also we are going to use for error, we will paste it for error as well, right? So, and we are going to have this both sign in and error at the sign in page. So here we will have sign in, and error also will be going to the sign in page, right? I'll make sign in hyphen sign hyphen in, okay, right? The next thing we are going to set up as session. So here we are going to take this session and we are going to paste it over here, right? And by default we are going to use this strategy as a JWT strategy here, right? So I'll remove all those things, it's not needed. And this would be the maximum age, and this is the update age, right? And we are not going to use this generate session token, right? So we'll remove this for now. Now the next thing which we are going to configure is adapter, right? And here we are going to use our Prisma adapter, right, which we have installed, right? So Prisma adapter, and inside this we are going to pass our Prisma instance, right? So now we have to import our Prisma adapter and Prisma both. So first of all, let's import our Prisma adapter. No, it's not coming, right? So let's import it manually. Import Prisma adapter from at auth slash Prisma adapter, right? And we have to import our Prisma as well, right? So we have our Prisma, right? Import Prisma from at the rate, we know that we have our in DB folder, right? DB Prisma, right? And now we have passed this Prisma instance inside our Prisma adapter, right? Now the next thing, we have to configure our provider, right? And inside this provider we can pass multiple providers, right? So first of all, we are going to add our credential provider. See here, this is, we have provider. So provider, if you see here, the default value is blank, right? And if you want to add the provider, we can add our whatever the provider we want to use, right? So now we are going to use the credential provider. If you see here, we have our credential provider, right? So now we are going to use this credential provider and we will update it accordingly, right? Now here we will update our provider, and now let's update it. So this credential provider needs to be imported, and this credential provider needs to be imported from Next Auth provider credentials, right? So here we are going to import this, right? Now we will remove all these things. We will have our name, and then we will have our credential. Inside our credential we are going to pass email and password. So here we have email, and here we will have password, and type we have here as email, right? And I'll remove this placeholder for now, and here we have type as a password, right? Now inside our authorize we will change it. Inside our authorize we are going to pass credentials, and here we are going to check first of all if we have the credentials or not. If credentials not, it means credentials are null, then return null, right? Now next thing we have to check our user if it is exist for the given email or not. So here we are going to update this. Now here we are going to check our user from the database. So await Prisma dot user dot find first, right? And inside this find first we are going to pass our where clause where, and inside this where we are going to check our email is credentials dot email, right? Credentials dot email as string. Okay, now this will check the user from our database by provided our this credential email, right? So here let's comment it as find user from database, right? Now we will check if user exists, and this will be user, right? Now we will check if this user exists or not. So what we are going to do here we will check if user exist and password match. Okay, and here we are going to check if user exist and user dot password exist, right? Then we are going to check if password match or not. So here we'll take a variable as constant is match equal to, we are going to compare password, right? So we have a function compare sync, right? And inside this we are going to pass our both of the password. First of all, the password which we are getting, which is from credentials, right? Credentials dot password, we are going to make it as a string. And the second thing, we have our user password, right, which is stored inside our database, right? And both are going to be match. If both are going to be match, then each match will be true, right? And once each match will be true, if is match is true, if user match, then we have to return as id user dot id, and we have to return name as user dot name, and we have to return email as user dot email, right? And we have to return role also, right? Role. So user dot role. If user is authenticated, then we are going to return this object, right? And the second thing, if user does not exist, our password does not match, then we have to return null, right? So what we will do here, we will return null if user does not exist, our password does not match, right? So we are going to return null, right? The next thing which we are going to use the callback. So if you see here we have callbacks. So callbacks are asynchronous functions that you can use to control what happened when an action is performed, right? So whenever any action is performed, and if you want to control, if you want to do anything on a particular action, you can do it over here, right? So we are going to implement this callback, and let's copy this callbacks and use it over here. Right after this square bracket, and here we will use callback, right? And now for now I'm not going to use this sign in and redirect, and this JWT we are going to bit later. But first of all, let's see the session. So now inside the session we are going to have session, then we are going to have in a different order, like first I'm going to use this user, and then I'm going to have the trigger, right? And remember that we can customize it as per our requirement. This callbacks can be customized, right? And I'll give type as any for time being, right? So here we are going to do small changes before returning our session. We will update our session ID, role and name value from the token value, right? So here we will be updating with the session dot user dot ID equal to ID is coming from token sub, right? So whatever the JWT token we have, dot sub is going to have the ID, right? So here we are going to use this sub, and the next two things that we are going to use as role, right? This token dot role, and the third thing which would be name. Here we have token dot name, right? And also this trigger we are going to use if user is trying to update, right? So here we will give a condition if trigger equal to we have update, right? It means user is trying to update their profile, right? So what we have to do here, we will just update the session name, right? Session dot user dot name equal to username, right? Simple, that's it. And after that we will return our session. And for the time being we are getting error over here for any, so I'm just going to disable it. Fine. And we are going to implement this JWT a bit later. Now if you see here, we are getting type error for config. So now let's import our type. Import type as NextAuth config. NextAuth config from NextAuth, right? And at the very end of this config, we are going to here write satisfy as NextAuth, right? Satisfy as NextAuth config, right? Satisfies as NextAuth config, right? And what is this NextAuth config? Let's remove this. It's not required here. Yep. So now this NextAuth config type is going to be satisfy this config, right? Now we are not getting error, right? Now hopefully we should be good. Let's format it. Format document, right? Now it's formatted. Now the very last thing which we have to do, that we have to initialize it, right? Let me show you how we can initialize. So here if you see in the configuration section under initialization, since we have API routes and route handler, since we are using this app router, right? So here we are going to use this. So we are going to, first of all, we are going to import our handler which we have created from our auth file, right? And then we are going to export our get and post method from handler, right? And all those things that we are going to do inside our API auth next auth route, right? So now let's do that. Here inside our app, we are going to create another folder as API, where we are going to put all of our API here, API, and inside this API, we are going to have folder like auth, right? And inside this auth folder, we are going to have our all the routes, right? This is going to consider all the routes next auth, right? And inside this, we are going to create our route.ts file, right? Great. Now in this route.ts file, first of all, we have to import our handler, which we have created in our auth file, right? So see this auth file and we have exported it, right? See this handler. So now we are going to import this handler inside this route. So here we have to import our handlers from at auth, right? And now we have to deserialize this handler because we need the get and post methods, right? So here we will use our export const get and post method from handler, right? That's it. Now we should be good. And now let's test our routes. So here we have our localhost 3000, and then after that we have our API and auth and session, right? So as of now we don't have any session, so we are expected this null value. So it means like our API is working fine and we don't have as of now any session, right? Now the next thing, we are going to create our sign in page. See here we have sign in. So once user will click on sign in, we will get a sign in page, and in our next session we are going to create our sign in page and do our authentication from sign in page, right? All right, that's all from this session. And friends, if you find this tutorial helpful, do me a favor, like this video and support me and my channel, and subscribe my channel if you haven't already done for more content like this, and share this with your fellow developer who might find it useful. And if you really love my work, then consider buy me a coffee to support for more free tutorials. Link is given below in the description. Alright, that's all for the day. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in my next video. Till then, take care and keep learning.